Bean could leave and strike out on his own. He'd never say that to Sister Carlotta, because it would only worry her. Besides, she was bound to know it already. She had the test data, and those tests had been designed to tell everything about a person. Why, she probably knew him better than he knew himself. Of course, he knew that back then when he took those tests. There was hardly an honest answer on any of the psychological tests. He had already read enough psychology by the time he took them that he knew exactly what answers were needed to show the profile that would probably get him into battle school. So, in fact, she didn't know him from those tests at all. But then, he didn't have any idea what his real answers would have been, then or now. So it isn't as if he knew himself any better. But she had observed him, and she was wise in her own way. She probably did know him better than he knew himself. What a laugh, though, to think that one human being could ever really know another. You could get used to each other, get so habituated that you could speak their words right along with them. But you never knew why other people said what they said or did what they did, because they never even knew themselves. Nobody understands anybody. And yet, somehow we live together, mostly in peace, and get things done with a high enough success rate that people keep trying. Human beings get married, and a lot of the marriages work, and they have children, and most of them grow up to be decent people. And they have schools and businesses and factories and farms that have results at some level of acceptability, all without having a clue what's going on inside anybody's head. Muddling through. That's what human beings do. That was the part of being human that Bean hated the most. Hey, David, I hope you're doing well tonight. I'm just going to give a short update of myself. Things, things have gone worse for me. I barely made it through till this moon. Yeah, and yeah, I think I'm going to make the update as short as that. But instead of just reading or leaving, I'm going to read a bit. I'm going to read from next from the Never Ending Story. I've got to at least do this part, or naming this The Swamps of Sadness doesn't work. Atreyu rode northward, ever northward. He allowed himself and his little horse only the most necessary stops for sleep and food. He rode by day and he rode by night, in the scorching sun and the pelting rain. He looked neither to the left nor to the right and asked no more questions. The farther northward he went, the darker it grew. An unchanging, leaden gray twilight filled the days. At night, the northern lights played across the sky. One morning, when time seemed to be standing still in the murky light, he looked out from a hilltop and finally glimpsed the swamps of sadness. Clouds of mist drifted over them. Here and there, he distinguished little clumps of trees, their trunks divided at the bottom into 4, 5, or more crooked stilts, which made the trees look like great many-legged crabs standing in the black water. From the brown foliage hung aerial roots resembling motionless tentacles. It was next to impossible to make out where there was solid ground between the pools of water and where there was only a covering of water plants. Artak whinnied with horror. "Are we going in there, master?" "Yes," said Atreyu. "We must find the Tortoiseshell Mountain. It's at the center of those swamps." He urged Artax on, and Artax obeyed. Step by step, he tested the firmness of the ground, but that made progress very slow. At length, Atreyu dismounted and led Artax by the bridle. Several times the horse sank in, but managed to pull himself loose. But the farther they went into the swamps of sadness, the more sluggish his movements became. He let his head drop and barely dragged himself forward. Artax, said Atreyu, what's the matter? I don't know, master. I think we should turn back. There's no sense in all this. We're chasing after something you only dreamed about. We won't find anything. Maybe it's too late, even now. Maybe the childlike empress is already dead and everything we're doing is useless. Let's turn back, master. Atreyu was astonished. Artax, he said, you've never spoken like this. What's the matter? Are you sick? Maybe I am, said Artax. With every step we take, the sadness grows in my heart. I've lost hope, master, and I feel so heavy I can't go on. But we must go on, cried Atreyu. Come along, Artax. He tugged at the bridle, but Artax stood still. He had sunk in up to his belly, and he made no further effort to extricate himself. Artax, cried Atreyu, you mustn't let yourself go. Come, pull yourself out or you'll sink. Leave me, master, said the little horse. I can't make it. Go on alone. Don't bother about me. I can't stand the sadness anymore. I want to die. Desperately, Atreyu pulled at the bridle, but the horse sank deeper and deeper. When only his head emerged from the black water, Atreyu took it in his arms. I'll hold you, Artax, he whispered. I won't let you go under. The little horse uttered one last soft neigh. You can't help me, master. It's all over for me. Neither of us knew what we were getting into. Now we know why these are called the swamps of sadness. It's the sadness that has made me so heavy. That's why I'm sinking. There's no help. But I'm here too, said Atreyu. And I don't feel anything. You're wearing the gem, master, said Artax. It protects you. Then I'll hang it around your neck, Atreyu cried. Maybe it will protect you too. He started taking the chain off his neck. No, the little horse whinnied. You mustn't do that, master. The glory was entrusted to you. You weren't given permission to pass it on as you see fit. You must carry on the quest without me. Atreyu pressed his face into the horse's cheek. Artax, he whispered. Oh, my Artax. Will you grant my last wish? The little horse asked. Atreyu nodded in silence. Then I beg you to go away. I don't want you to see my end. Will you do me that favor? Slowly, Atreyu arose. Half the horse's head was already in the black water. Farewell, Atreyu, my master, he said, and thank you. Atreyu pressed his lips together. He couldn't speak. Once again, he nodded to Artax, and then he turned away. Bastian was sobbing. He couldn't help it. His eyes filled with tears, and he couldn't go on reading. He had to take out his handkerchief and blow his nose before he could go on. Atreyu waited and waited. For how long, he didn't know. The mist grew thicker, and he felt as if he were blind and deaf. It seemed to him that he had been wandering around in circles for hours. He stopped worrying about where to set his foot down, and yet he never sank in above his knees. By some mysterious means, the childlike empress's amulet led him the right way. Then suddenly he saw a high, steep mountain ahead of him. Pulling himself up from crag to crag, he climbed to the rounded top. At first, he didn't notice what this mountain was made of, but from the top, he overlooked the whole mountain, and then he saw that it consisted of great slabs of tortoise shell, with moss growing in the crevices between them. He had found Tortoiseshell Mountain, but the discovery gave him no pleasure. Now that his faithful little horse was gone, it left him almost indifferent. Still, he would have to find out who this Morla the Aged One was, and where she actually lived. While he was mulling it over, he felt a slight tremor shaking the mountain. Then he heard a hideous wheezing and lip smacking, and a voice that seemed to issue from the innermost bowels of the earth. "Sakes alive, old woman, somebody's crawling around on us." And hurrying to the edge of the ridge where the sounds had come from, Atreyu had slipped on a bed of moss. Since there was nothing for him to hold on to, he slid faster and faster and finally fell off of the mountain. Luckily, he landed on a tree which caught him in his branches. Looking back at the mountain, he saw an enormous cave. Water was splashing and gushing inside, and something was moving. Slowly, the something came out. It looked like a boulder as big as a house. When it came into full light, Atreyu saw that it was a head attached to a long, wrinkled neck. The head of a turtle. Its eyes were black and as big as ponds. The mouth was dripping with muck and water weeds. This whole Tortoiseshell Mountain, it suddenly dawned on Atreyu, was one enormous beast, a giant swamp turtle, Morla, the Aged One. The wheezing, gurgling voice spoke again. "What are you doing here, son?" Atreyu reached for the amulet on his chest and held it in such a way that the great eyes couldn't help seeing it. "Do you recognize this, Morla?" She took a while to answer. "Sakes alive, Orin, we haven't seen that in a long time, have we, old woman? The emblem of the childlike empress. Not in a long time." "The childlike empress is sick," said Atreyu. "Did you know that?" "It's all the same to us, isn't it, old woman?" Morla replied. She seemed to be talking to herself, perhaps because she had no one else to talk to for heaven knows how long. "If we don't save her, she'll die," Atreyu cried out. "The nothing is spreading everywhere. I've seen it myself." Morla stared at him out of her great empty eyes. "We don't mind, do we, old woman?" "But then we shall all die," Atreyu screamed. "Every last one of us." "Sakes alive," said Morla. "But what do we care? Nothing matters to us anymore. It's all the same to us." "But you'll be destroyed too, Morla," cried Atreyu angrily. "Or do you expect, because you're so old, to outlive Fantastica?" "Sakes alive," Morla gurgled. "We're old, son, much too old. Lived long enough, seen too much. When you know as much as we do, nothing matters. Things just repeat, day and night, summer and winter. The world is empty and aimless. Everything circles around. Whatever starts up must pass away. Whatever is born must die. It all cancels out, good and bad, beautiful and ugly. Everything's empty. Nothing is real. Nothing matters." Atreyu didn't know what to answer. The Aged One's dark, empty, pond-sized eyes paralyzed his thoughts. After a while, he heard her speak again. "You're young, son. If you were as old as we are, you'd know there's nothing but sadness. Why shouldn't we die? You and I, the childlike empress, the whole lot of us. Anyway, it's all flim-flam, meaningless games. Nothing matters. Leave us in peace, son. Go away." Atreyu tensed his will to fight off the paralysis that flowed from her eyes. "If you know so much," he said, "you must know what the childlike empress's illness is and whether there's a cure for it." We do, don't we, old woman?" Morla wheezed. "But it's all the same to us whether she's saved or not. So why should we tell you? If it's really all the same to you, Atreyu argued, you might just as well tell me. We could. We could, couldn't we, old woman? Morla grunted. But we don't feel like it. Then it's not all the same to you. Then you yourself don't believe what you're saying. After a long silence, he heard a deep gurgling and belching. That must have been some kind of laughter, if Morla, the aged one, was still capable of laughing. In any case, she said, you're a sly one, son. Really sly. We haven't had so much fun in a long time, have we, old woman? Sakes alive, it's true. We might just as well tell you. Makes no difference. Should we tell him, old woman? A long silence followed. Atreyu waited anxiously for Morla's answer, taking care not to interrupt the slow, cheerless flow of her thoughts. At last she spoke. Your life is short, son. Ours is long, much too long. But we both live in time. You a short time, we a long time. The childlike empress has always been there, but she's not old. She has always been young. She still is. Her life isn't measured by time, but by names. She needs a new name. She keeps needing new names. Do you know her name, son? No, Atreyu admitted. I've never heard it. You couldn't have, said Morla. Not even we can remember it. Yet she has had many names, but they're all forgotten, over and done with. But without a name, she can't live. All the childlike empress needs is a new name, and then she'll get well. But it makes no difference whether she gets well or not. She closed her pond-sized eyes and began slowly to pull in her head. Wait, cried Atreyu. Where can she get a name? Who can give her one? Where can I find the name? None of us, Morla gurgled. No inhabitant of Fantastica can give her a new name. So it's hopeless. Sakes alive. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Who then? Cried Atreyu in despair. Who can give her the name that will save her and save us all? Don't make so much noise, said Morla. Leave us in peace and go away. Even we don't know who can give her a name. If you don't know, Atreyu screamed even louder. Who does? She opened her eyes one last time. If you weren't wearing the gem, she wheezed, we'd eat you up just to have peace and quiet. Sakes alive. Who? Atreyu insisted. Tell me who knows, and I'll leave you in peace forever. It doesn't matter, she replied. But maybe Eulala in the Southern Oracle knows. She may know. It's all the same to us. How can I get there? You can't get there at all, son. Not in 10,000 days' journey. Your life is too short. You'd die first. It's too far. In the south. Much too far. So it's all hopeless. We told you so in the first place, didn't we, old woman? Sakes alive, son. Give it up. Most important, leave us in peace. With that, she closed her empty gazing eyes and pulled her head into the cave for good. Atreyu knew he would learn no more from her. At that same time, the shadowy being, which had condensed out of the darkness of the heath, picked up Atreyu's trail and headed for the swamps of sadness. Nothing and no one in all of Fantastica could defect it from that trail. Bastian propped his head on his hand and was looking thoughtfully into space. Strange, he said aloud, that no one in all Fantastica can give the childlike empress a new name. If it had been just a matter of giving her a name, Bastian could easily have helped. He was tops at that. But unfortunately, he was not in Fantastica, where his talents were needed, and would even have won him friends and admirers. On the other hand, he was glad not to be there. Not for anything in the world would he have ventured into such a place as the swamps of sadness. And then this spooky creature of darkness that was chasing Atreyu without his knowing it. Bastian would have liked to warn him, but that was impossible. All he could do was hope and go on reading. Sorry that you're having a hard time, David. Love you too, Pat. Hey, Levi. Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, it's not pleasant in the swamps of sadness. And I got right up to my nostrils recently, but I'm still here. Hey, Nolan. Hope you're doing well. Thanks, David. You say strong, too. Yeah. The last one ended with nothing to do but hope and go on reading. So I'm going to read a few more little things. These are from Xenocide. At the beginning of each chapter, two aliens are speaking to each other. One's the Hive Queen, so it's an alien race. I don't know, similar to ants or wasps, where there's a queen and all the workers. The queen is in all the bodies, though, mind in all the bodies. The other species are the Pequeninos. They have various stages of life, one which is humanoid. They spend their last stage of life as a tree. There's father trees and mother trees. Father trees communicate telepathically. And the queen hive communicates telepathically. So I'm going to read a few little exchanges between the queen hive and the father tree. The most unpleasant thing about human beings is that they don't metamorphose. Your people and mine are born as grubs, but we transform ourselves into a higher form before we reproduce. Human beings remain grubs all their lives. Human beings do metamorphose. They change their identity constantly. However, each new identity thrives on the delusion that it has always been in possession of the body it has just conquered. Such changes are superficial. The nature of the organism remains the same. Humans are very proud of their changes, but every imagined transformation turns out to be a new set of excuses for behaving exactly as the individual has always behaved. You are too different from humans ever to understand them. You are too similar to humans for ever to be able to see them clearly. So many of your people are becoming Christians, believing in the God these human beings brought with them. You don't believe in God? The question never came up. We've always remembered how we began. You evolved. We were created by a virus that God created in order to create us. So, you too are a believer. I understand belief. No, you desire belief. I desired enough to act as if I believed. Maybe that's what faith is. Or deliberate insanity. Ender has been plaguing us lately, insisting that we think of a way to travel faster than light. You said it couldn't be done. That's what we think. That's what human scientists think. But Ender insists that if Ansibles can transmit information, we should be able to transmit matter at the same velocity. Of course, that's nonsense. There's no comparison between information and physical reality. Why does he want so badly to travel faster than light? It's a silly idea, isn't it? To arrive somewhere before your image does, like stepping through a mirror in order to try to meet yourself on the other side. Ender and Reuter have talked about this a lot. I've heard them. Ender thinks that perhaps matter and energy are composed of nothing but information, that physical reality is nothing but the message that phyllotes are transmitting to each other. What does Reuter say? He says that Ender's half right. Reuter says that physical reality is a message, and the message is a question that the phyllotes are continually asking God. What's the question? One word. Why? And how does God answer them? With life. Reuter says life is how God gives purpose to the universe. I've been talking to Ender and his sister, Valentine. She's a historian. Explain this. She searches through the books to find out the stories of humans, and then writes stories about what she finds and gives them to all the other humans. If the stories are already written down, why does she write them again? Because they aren't well understood. She helps people understand them. If the people closer to that time didn't understand them, how can she, coming later, understand them better? I asked this myself, and Valentine said that she doesn't always understand them better, but the old writers understood what the stories meant to the people of their time, and she understands what the stories mean to people of her time. So the story changes. Yes. And each time, they still think of a story as a true memory? Valentine explained something about some stories being true and others being truthful. I didn't understand any of it. Why don't they just remember their stories accurately in the first place? Then they wouldn't have to keep lying to each other. Thanks, David. I'm glad you're still here, too. Pat, if you're driving, pay attention to traffic, not me. I love you, too. All right, I have 2 more sections bookmarked. It's a wonder that human beings ever became intelligent enough to travel between worlds. Not really. I've been thinking about that lately. Starflight, they learned from you. Ender says they didn't grasp the physics of it until your first colony fleet reached their star system. Should we have stayed at home for fear of teaching Starflight to soft-bodied, four-limbed, hairless slugs? You spoke a moment ago as if you believed that human beings had actually achieved intelligence. Clearly they have. I think not. I think they've found a way to fake intelligence. Their starships fly. We haven't noticed any of yours racing the light waves through space. We're still very young as a species. But look at us. Look at you. We both have evolved a very similar system. We each have 4 kinds of life in our species. The young, who are helpless grubs. The mates who never achieve intelligence. With you, it's your drones. And with us, it's the little mothers. Then there's the many, many individuals who have enough intelligence to perform manual tasks. Our wives and brothers, your workers. And finally, the intelligent ones, we father trees, and you, the hive queen. We are the repository of the wisdom of the race because we have time to think, to contemplate. Ideation is our primary activity. While the humans are all running around as brothers and wives, as workers, just workers, their young go through a helpless grub stage too, which lasts longer than some of them think. And when it's time to reproduce, they all turn into drones or little mothers, little machines that only have one goal in life: sex and die. They think they're rational through all those stages. Self-delusion. Even at their best, they never, as individuals, rise above the level of manual laborers. Who among them has time to become intelligent? Not one. They never know anything. They don't have enough years in their little lives to come to an understanding of anything at all. And yet they think they understand. From earliest childhood, they delude themselves into thinking they comprehend the world, while all that's really going on is that they've got some primitive assumptions and prejudices. As they get older, they learn a more elevated vocabulary in which to express their mindless pseudo-knowledge and bully other people into accepting their prejudices as if they were true. But it all amounts to the same thing. Individually, human beings are all dolts, while collectively, they're a collection of dolts. But in all their scurrying around and pretending to be wise, throwing out idiotic, half-understood theories about this and that, one or two of them will come up with some idea that's just a little bit closer to the truth than what was already known. And in a sort of fumbling trial and error, about half the time the truth actually rises to the top and becomes accepted by people who still don't understand it, who simply adopt it as a new prejudice to be trusted blindly until the next dolt accidentally comes up with an improvement. So you're saying that no one is ever individually intelligent, and groups are even stupider than individuals. And yet, by keeping so many fools engaged and pretending to be intelligent, they still come up with some of the same results that an intelligent species would come up with? Exactly. If they're so stupid and we're so intelligent, why do we have only one hive, which thrives here because a human being carried us? And why have you been so utterly dependent on them for every technical and scientific advance you make? Maybe intelligence isn't all it's cracked up to be. Maybe we're the fools for thinking we know things. Maybe humans are the only ones who can deal with the fact that nothing can ever be known at all. Ender's coming to see us. He comes and talks to me all the time. And we can talk directly into his mind, but he insists on coming. He doesn't feel like he's talking to us unless he sees us. He has a harder time distinguishing between his own thoughts and the ones we put in his mind when we converse from a distance. So he's coming. And you don't like this? He wants us to tell him answers. And we don't know any answers. You know everything that the humans know. You got into space, didn't you? You don't even need their ansibles to talk from world to world. They're so hungry for answers, these humans. They have so many questions. We have questions too, you know. They want to know why, or how. Everything all tied up in a nice, neat bundle like a cocoon. The only time we do that is when we're metamorphosing a queen. They like to understand everything, So do we, you know. Yes, you'd like to think that you're just like the humans, wouldn't you? But you're not like Ender, not like the humans. He has to know the cause of everything. He has to make a story about everything. And we don't know any stories. We know memories. We know things that happened, but we don't know why they happen, not the way he wants us to. Of course you do. We don't even care why, the way these humans do. We find out as much as we need to know to accomplish something, but they always want to know more than they need to know. After they get something to work, they're still hungry to know why it works and why the cause of its working works. Aren't we like that? Maybe you will be when the Descolata stops interfering with you. Or maybe we'll be like your workers. If you are, you won't care. They're all very happy. It's intelligence that makes you unhappy. The workers are either hungry or not hungry, in pain or not in pain. They're never curious or disappointed or anguished or ashamed. When it comes to things like that, these humans make me and you look like workers. I think you just don't know us well enough to compare. We've been inside your head, and we've been inside Ender's head, and we've been inside our own heads for 1,000 generations. And these humans make us look like we're asleep. Even when they're asleep, they're not asleep. Earthborn animals do this thing inside their brains, a sort of mad firing off of synapses, controlled insanity while they're asleep. The part of their brain that records sight or sound is firing off every hour or two while they sleep. Even when all the sights and sounds are completely random nonsense, their brains just keep trying to assemble it into something sensible. They try to make stories out of it. It's complete random nonsense with no purpose, with no possible correlation to the real world. And yet they turn it into these crazy stories, and then they forget them. All that work, coming up with these stories, when they wake up, they forget almost all of them. But when they do remember, then they try to make stories about those crazy stories, trying to make them fit into their real lives. We know about their dreaming. Maybe without the Descolata, you'll dream too. Why should we want to? As you say, it's meaningless. Random firings of the synapses of the neurons in their brains. They're practicing. They're doing it all the time, coming up with stories, making connections, making sense out of nonsense. What good is it when it means nothing? That's just it. They have a hunger we know nothing about. The hunger for answers, the hunger for making sense, the hunger for stories. We have stories. You remember deeds. They make up deeds. They change what their stories mean. They transform things so that the same memory can mean 1,000 different things. Even from their dreams, sometimes they make up out of that randomness something that illuminates everything. Not one human being has anything like the kind of mind you have, the kind we have. Nothing is powerful, and their lives are so short. They die so fast. But in their century or so, they come up with 10,000 meanings for every one that we discover. Most of them wrong. Even if the vast majority of them are wrong, even if 99 of every 100 is stupid and wrong, out of 10,000 ideas, that still leaves them with 100 good ones. That's how they make up for being so stupid and having such short lives and small memories. Dreams and madness, magic and mystery and philosophy. You can't say that you never think of stories. What you've just been telling me is a story. I know. See, humans do nothing you can't do. Don't you understand? I got even this story from Ender's mind. It's his. He got the seed of it from somebody else, something he read, and combined it with all the things he thought of until it made sense to him. It's all there in his head. While we are like you, we have a clear view of the world. I have no trouble finding my way through your mind, everything orderly and sensible and clear. You'd be as much at ease in mine. What's in your head is reality, more or less, as best you understand it. But in Ender's mind, madness. Thousands of competing, contradictory, impossible visions that make no sense at all because they can't all fit together. But they do fit together. He makes them fit together. This way today, and that way tomorrow, as they're needed. As if he can make a new idea machine inside his head for every new problem he faces. As if he conceives of a new universe to live in, every hour a new one, often hopelessly wrong, and he ends up making mistakes and bad judgments. But sometimes so perfectly right that it opens things up like a miracle. And I look through his eyes and I see the world his new way, and it changes everything. Madness, and then illumination. We knew everything there was to know before we met these humans, before we built our connection with Ender's mind. Now we discover there are so many ways of knowing the same things that we'll never find them all. Unless the humans teach you. You see, we are scavengers also. You're a scavenger. We're supplicants. If only they were worthy of their own mental abilities. Aren't they? They are planning to blow you up, you remember. There's so much possibility in their minds, but they're still, after all, individually stupid and small-minded and half-blind and half-mad. There's still the 99% of their stories that are hideously wrong and lead them into terrible errors. Sometimes we wish we could tame them, like the workers. We tried, with Ender, but we couldn't do it. Couldn't make a worker of him. Why not? Too stupid. Can't pay attention long enough. Human minds lack focus. They get bored and wander off. We had to build a bridge outside him, using the computer that he was most closely bonded with. Computers. Now those things can pay attention, and their memory is neat, orderly, everything organized and findable. But they don't dream. No madness. Too bad. All right, that brings us to the end of story time. Yes, 2076. Lamp has a red light setting. Thanks, Ryan. I'll keep going best I'm able. As for tonight, I don't think I have anything else in me. I didn't quite make it to an hour, but I did more than just showing up and proving I was still alive. So I'll read Levi's comment and then wrap it up on that. Levi was just chatting about aliens with his mate. He says, I think they search the universe for culture. Yeah, wouldn't be much else to search for. Presumably, you can find all the physical elements around any star. The only thing worth traveling for would be culture and ideas. On that note, I'm going to head out. I hope everyone's doing better than I am. Those of you who are struggling, stay strong, try to keep going. God bless, lunatic love to all.